18 years ago, she was a forgotten child, barefoot in a blizzard, knocking on the devil's door because it was the only door left. Tonight, a 6-year-old boy is hiding in a gas station bathroom, whispering into a phone, asking the same question she once asked a stranger. And the woman who answers is her. This is what happens when one act of mercy refuses to die. On this channel, we tell stories that live at the intersection of power and love, where mafia bosses become fathers, where broken children become healers, and where family means choosing someone every single day, no matter the cost. Love is not a feeling that fades, it is a chain. One person saves you, and one day you save someone else. That chain must never be broken. If this story stayed with you, please share it forward like the chain it describes, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe, because every story we tell is one more link in that chain.
She glanced down at her own small body. A huge, ripped t-shirt hung down past her knees. Her shorts were paper thin, not meant for a blizzard. The flip-flops on her feet were so worn out that the bottoms had split open. It was 5 degrees below zero, and she was wearing clothes for a summer day. Dried blood was caked on her inner thigh, from her escape, from the man her mother had welcomed into their apartment last night. The burn mark on her left arm showed from under her tattered sleeve. It was a flawless circle. Marcus had ground a lit cigarette into her skin 2 weeks ago because she had dropped a delivery. Emma didn't tremble. Her body had given up on feeling cold months, maybe even years ago. She couldn't recall. She lifted her tiny fist and knocked 3 times. The sound bounced off the alley walls. The snow kept coming down. A rat scurried right past her, but she didn't even blink. Time stretched on. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Emma stood her ground. There was nowhere else for her to go. She had trekked for 3 hours through the icy city to get to this spot. Her feet were completely numb. Her lips were a deep shade of purple, but she stayed perfectly still. This was her last hope. The door creaked open. A man filled the doorway. He was tall and built like a brick wall. His head was shaved clean, and a long scar sliced across his neck. His eyes were a frosty blue and held nothing inside them. Viktor Morozov gazed down. He saw a little girl in flip-flops, her lips the color of a fresh bruise. She had the eyes of someone who had witnessed too much and endured too long in such a short life. Those were not the eyes of a 7-year-old. They were the eyes of a fighter who had refused to quit. Victor said nothing. He posed no questions. He didn't ask why a half-frozen kid was standing at the back door of Chicago's most notorious club at almost 3 in the morning. He just moved out of the way. Emma entered. The corridor was dim and stretched on. You could feel the thumping of music from deeper inside the club. The bass vibrated through the floor, but Victor didn't take her toward the sound. He made a left, then a right, and went down a flight of stairs. Emma trailed behind him without a single question. She had learned a long time ago that questions earned you a slap. They came to a stop before a thick wooden door. Victor rapped twice, waited a beat, then rapped one more time. It was a code. The door was opened from the other side. Emma stepped into a den of wolves. 11 men were seated around a huge table carved from dark oak. The air was heavy with the scent of cigars and expensive aftershave. Every single man was in a suit. Every single man had ink running up his neck and over his hands, vanishing under his shirt collar. Maps were laid out on the table. Red circles identified turf. Blue lines marked borders. It was a meeting about taking over, about conflict, about subjects a 7-year-old girl could never grasp. All talk ceased. Every pair of eyes in the room locked onto her. Emma kept walking. The slap of her broken flip-flops was the only sound on the concrete floor. She didn't look at the men sitting on either side. She didn't react when one of them moved in his chair. She had survived Marcus Kane for 2 years. She had been hit, burned, starved, and trapped in closets. These men in their fancy suits were not going to frighten her. Nothing could frighten her now. She had run out of fear a very long time ago. At the very end of the table sat a man who was different from the rest. He wore a black vest over a white shirt, with the top button loose and no tie. A thin scar sliced through his left eyebrow. His hair was black, with touches of silver at his temples. His jawline was so sharp it looked like it could cut you. But it was his eyes that made Emma freeze. They were pure black, like looking down an endless pit. He was completely motionless. Everyone else had shown some reaction when she came in. This man hadn't even blinked. Emma didn't know who was in charge. She couldn't figure out the pecking order of gangsters, but she knew one simple truth. The man with the most power always sits at the head of the table. She stopped right in front of him. "Are you the man who makes bad people disappear?" Her voice was a dry, broken whisper. She hadn't had a drink of water in 2 days. The words felt like they were scraping her throat. A young man at the other end of the table chuckled. Victor's head snapped in his direction. A single glare was all it took. The laughing stopped immediately. Dominic Vasquez showed no emotion. He didn't crack a smile. He didn't frown. He just leaned forward in his seat and examined the child who stood before him. He noticed the burn on her arm. He noticed the bruises shaped like fingers that encircled her neck. He noticed the dried blood on her legs. He noticed how her collarbone stuck out from under her fragile skin. But above all else, he noticed her eyes. They were green. They were beautiful. They were eyes that should have belonged to a little girl who had dolls and believed in happily ever afters. But instead, they were hollow, lifeless. They were the eyes of someone who had lost all hope in the world. Something deep inside Dominic's chest fractured. A memory broke through to the surface. A little girl with dark hair and a smile missing a tooth. 8 years old, her laughter filling the air in the sunshine. Isabella. The face of his sister was suddenly layered over the face of this shattered little girl. Dominic lifted one hand, just a small motion. Every man in the room got to his feet, their chairs scraping loudly on the concrete. They filed out of the room without a single word. The door shut behind them with a solid, heavy sound. Now only 3 people were left: Dominic, Victor, and Emma. The room was quiet. Dominic's gaze was fixed on the girl. His voice was soft, low, the voice of a man who never had to shout. "Which bad people?" Emma used both of her small hands. She took the collar of her huge shirt and tugged it down, revealing her shoulders, her chest, and her back. Scars, bruises, burns, welts, old injuries, piled on top of fresh ones. It was a roadmap of pain, drawn on the body of a child who weighed less than 40 pounds. She looked him straight in his black eyes. All of them. Dominic was still for a very long time. He just stared at the marks that covered Emma's tiny frame, and a dark, ancient anger began to stir behind his eyes. Victor. Just one word. It was all he needed to say. Victor was already taking out his phone. "Dr. Chen, now." He went outside to place the call. The door closed, and Dominic was now alone with the child. Emma pulled her shirt back into place. She just stood there in the center of the room, waiting. She did not take a seat. She had not been told she could sit. "What is your name?" "Emma?" "Emma what?" "I don't know. Marcus never said what my other name was." Dominic's jaw clenched. "Who is Marcus?" "He lives with my mom. He's not my father. My dad left a long time ago." "How old are you?" 7, I think. Or maybe 8, I don't know my birthday. The questions kept coming. Dominic asked them gently, one by one, and Emma gave him the answers. There was no emotion, no tears. She just listed the details of her life like she was reading off a shopping list. "She had started running," she explained. "She told him I knew how to be quiet. She said I wouldn't be any trouble." Dominic's hands balled into tight fists under the table, maybe even longer. "I had no idea where to turn. That's when I thought about what Marcus told me about you." The room fell into a deep quiet. Emma looked straight at Dominic. Her green eyes were empty of hope or expectation, showing only a sharp, methodical evaluation. "I can be an asset to you," she stated. "I am very good at making deliveries. I never get captured. The police do not bother with small children. I can be of service. All I need is a place where Marcus will never find me." Dominic was speechless. It felt like his throat had completely closed up. He had approved eliminations without a second thought. He had seen men plead for their lives and had felt absolutely nothing. Yet this little girl standing in front of him, proposing to be a drug mule for his protection, shattered something deep inside him. 10 seconds of complete silence passed. Victor remained positioned by the door. He had taken the lives of 47 people. He had questioned men until they begged for death. He had never averted his gaze from anything before. He averted his gaze now. Emma observed them both. She could not comprehend their responses. She had no idea why the large man with the scar had turned to face the wall. She did not understand why the man sitting at the table was unable to speak. "Did I say something I should not have?" Dominic managed to get the words out. "No, you did not. Then are you going to help me?" Before he could give her an answer, the door swung open. A woman entered the room. She was in her mid-40s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun. She held a medical kit in her hand. Her expression was serene and businesslike, but her eyes were incredibly perceptive. Dr. Sarah Chen glanced at Emma, then over to Dominic, and then her eyes returned to Emma. She got down on her knees in front of the little girl. "Hello, my dear. My name is Dr. Chen. I need to see if you have any injuries. Would that be all right?" Emma gave a small nod. She had been taught never to question adults. The checkup lasted for 15 minutes. Dr. Chen was silent as she worked, her expression becoming more grim with each new injury she found and noted. Once she was done, she went into the hallway with Dominic. Her voice was just above a whisper. "This little girl should not be alive. 3 old rib fractures never healed properly. She has second-degree burns on her arm. She is severely malnourished. There are also indications of an attempted sexual assault. She weighs only 40 pounds. That is what a 4-year-old weighs." Dr. Chen's hand was shaking just a little. "I cannot fathom how she is still living. I cannot fathom how she is even standing. I cannot fathom how she managed to walk into this place and speak in full sentences." Dominic gazed through the window at Emma, who was sitting perfectly still, in a chair, just waiting. "What is it that she needs?" "Everything," Dr. Chen replied. "She is going to need everything." Dr. Sarah Chen was standing in the corridor with Dominic. She was gripping her medical kit so hard her knuckles were white. Her voice was quiet and professional, but beneath that calm exterior, something was clearly falling apart. 3 broken ribs, and they are old injuries. They mended the wrong way because nobody ever bothered to set them. Every time she has to take a deep breath, it causes her pain. She has been living with that pain for months, possibly even years. Dominic remained silent. His jaw was clenched so hard that the muscles in his neck were visible. A second-degree burn is on her left forearm. It is round, about the size of a lit cigarette. She has at least 4 more of them on her back, all in different stages of healing. Dr. Chen went on, her voice getting softer with every sentence. "She is suffering from severe malnutrition. Her vitamin D levels are so low that her bones have started to soften. Based on my assessment, she has not been in the sunlight for any significant time in more than a year. She was deliberately kept indoors, out of sight." She stopped for a moment. The next words were much harder for her to say. "I found evidence of an attempted sexual assault. It was not completed, but the pattern of the bruises suggests it was tried multiple times. She resisted and fought back. Every time, she fought back." Dominic's nails were digging so deep into his palms that he could feel the skin tear. He did not care. "She weighs 40 pounds, Dr. Chen stated, a healthy 7-year-old. He stepped away from the window and took out his phone. The first call went to Marco, his tech expert. Marcus Kane. I need everything you can find on him. His address, his criminal record, his associates, and his daily schedule. You have 20 minutes. The second call was to his mother, Elena. Prepare the secure room at the shelter. There is a 7-year-old girl who has suffered a major trauma. She will require round-the-clock attention. The third call went to the club's kitchen. Soup, something light and warm. Bring it to the back room immediately. He ended the calls and stepped back inside. Emma looked up as he came in. Her eyes followed his every move, the way a captured animal watches a hunter, constantly alert, searching for a way out. Are you going to send me back? No. Are you going to make me work? No. Then why are you helping me? Dominic didn't have a good answer for her. Not one he could easily explain. Not one that would make sense to a child who had never known a single act of kindness. The food was brought in, a small bowl of hot chicken soup. It was plain and simple. Emma stared at it with suspicion, as if it were a trap. You can eat, Dominic said softly. She reached for the spoon, her hands shaking just a little. She took a small sip, and then one more. She ate with caution, not because she was polite, but because her body had forgotten how to handle a proper meal. When the bowl was half empty, she paused. Do I have to pay for this? She asked. Dominic felt a sharp pain in his chest. No. What if Marcus finds me? He will be so angry. He will hurt anyone who tried to help me. He says that all the time. He says I can never get away from him. Dominic moved toward her and knelt down so they were at eye level. He did not touch her. He did not even reach for her. He knew that sudden gestures would scare her. He understood that she only associated physical contact with being hurt. He simply met her green eyes and said, Marcus Kane will never find you. He will never touch you again. He will never harm anyone again. Ever. Emma examined his face, searching for any sign that he was lying. She was looking for a crack in his serious expression. She was waiting for this man to show his true colors and be just like all the others. She could not find one. Do you promise? She whispered. Dominic held her gaze firmly. I promise. For the first time since she had walked in, a tiny flicker appeared in Emma's empty eyes. It was not quite hope. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something that could grow into hope with enough time. Emma fell asleep on the leather couch just minutes after she finished the soup. Her small body finally gave up. 2 days without eating, 3 hours of running on frozen streets, and years of deep exhaustion had finally taken their toll. Dominic stayed at the window. He watched her sleep, curled into a tight ball with her knees pulled up to her chest. She clutched a cushion like it was a shield. Even in her sleep, her body remained in a defensive position, as if she were still ready for a blow. The sight of her tore open a wound that Dominic had spent 28 years trying to heal. He was 8 years old again, in a warehouse that smelled of rust and fuel. A rope was tied around his wrists. His sister was next to him, crying. Isabella was also 8. She was his twin, born just 7 minutes after he was. She had dark hair, a smile with a gap in her teeth, and a laugh that was like music. She called him Dom, because she could not pronounce Dominic when they were toddlers. The name had stuck. Their father, Ricardo Vasquez, was the boss before Dominic took over. He was a hard and cruel man who believed that any display of weakness was an invitation to be attacked. A rival group had kidnapped them on a Tuesday afternoon. They grabbed them from the car when the driver was getting gas and threw them into a van, driving for what seemed like forever. The demand for ransom came later that night. $2 million for both children. Ricardo refused to pay. We do not bargain with our enemies, he told his men. If I give them money, all of my rivals will know that my children can be used against me. They will never be safe. The kidnappers sent their reply. They made Dominic watch. Isabella screamed his name. She screamed for their father. She screamed for God. And then her screaming stopped. They released Dominic after that. They left him on the steps of his father's home like a piece of trash. He was a message, a warning, a lesson about what happened to the children of men who would not pay. Dominic did not speak for 2 years after that night. The doctors said he had severe post-traumatic stress disorder. They called it traumatic mutism. They gave it many names that did not change the fact that his sister was gone and he had been forced to witness it. Ricardo died 5 years later from a heart attack. Some people said it was the stress. Others said it was the guilt. Dominic did not care. He felt nothing at all as they buried his father. He took charge when he was 21. The very first thing he did was hunt down every man who was involved in Isabella's death. It took him 3 years. He found every single one. He ended all of them, some of them quickly, and some of them slowly. The second thing he did was to create a rule that would be the foundation of his power. No one is to harm a child in Vasquez territory. Ever, for any reason. Anyone who broke that rule just vanished. They were not arrested or warned. They simply disappeared. For 28 years, he had never broken that rule. For 28 years, the memory of Isabella still woke him up in the middle of the night. Now, he stood there watching another broken child sleep. The past and the present were colliding. Victor appeared next to him, silent as he always was. "What are you going to do with her?" Dominic did not look away from Emma. "I am going to do what I wish someone had done for Isabella." Victor nodded his head slowly. He did not ask for more details. He understood completely. Dominic's phone began to buzz. "Marco, what do you have?" Marcus Kane is 38 years old. He is a low-level dealer for the Santos gang. He lives at 1847 Ashland Avenue on the 3rd floor. His record includes assault, domestic violence, and drug distribution. He is a nobody. What else? He is looking for the girl everywhere. He has been making calls all night. The word on the street is that she knows too much. She saw things she should not have seen. She heard names she should not have heard. Dominic's hand tightened around the phone. "What names?" "I do not know yet, but Santos is getting nervous. A 7-year-old girl has them running scared. That means she is either valuable or dangerous. Maybe she is both." Dominic looked over at Emma, who was still asleep, holding on to that pillow as if her life depended on it. "Find out what she knows and find Marcus Kane." He hung up the phone. Victor watched him with a serious expression. "Santos will not be happy that we are getting involved." "I do not care what Santos likes. This could start a war." Dominic finally turned away from the window. His dark eyes were cold and determined. "Then a war it is." It was 6:30 in the morning. The sun had not yet come up. Chicago was still dark, frozen, and quiet. Dominic was not sleeping. He was sitting in the back of a black sport utility vehicle, watching the city go by through the tinted windows. Victor was driving. 4 other men were in a second vehicle behind them, on their way to 1847 Ashland Avenue. The building looked like it was falling apart. It had cracked walls, broken windows covered with cardboard and duct tape, and graffiti on every wall. It was the kind of place where people went to disappear. It was the kind of place where no one would hear you scream. They did not take the elevator. It had been broken for years. The stairwell smelled of urine and rotting trash. The sound of used needles crunched beneath their feet. From somewhere on an upper floor, a baby was crying. 3rd floor, apartment 312. Victor did not knock. He kicked the door one time. The frame shattered. The lock was torn from the rotten wood. The door swung open and slammed against the wall. They moved inside quickly, with their guns drawn, their eyes scanning every part of the room. The apartment was tiny. It was one room that served as a kitchen, a living room, and a bedroom. There was a bathroom that had no door. There was trash everywhere. Empty bottles, burnt spoons, and needles were scattered all over the floor. Marcus Kane was not there, but someone else was. A woman was lying on a mattress in the corner. There were no sheets or blankets, just a stained, bare mattress against the wall. She was shaking, but not from fear. She was in withdrawal. Lily Sullivan was 26 years old. She looked like she was 40. Her cheekbones stuck out from under her thin skin. Her eyes were so sunken they looked like empty holes. There were track marks all over both of her arms. Angry red lines were crisscrossing from her wrist to her elbow. She was wearing only a tank top and underwear. The tank top was hanging off of her thin body like a flag with no wind. When 5 armed men burst into her apartment, she did not scream. She did not try to run. She barely even moved. She was too deep in her withdrawal to feel any fear. "Marcus sent you?" Her voice was a dry, raspy whisper. It was the voice of someone whose throat had been ruined by years of smoking, screaming, and being silent. "Tell him I will have the money soon. The girl will come back. She always comes back." Dominic stood in the doorway and watched her. This was Emma's mother. This empty shell of a human being had given birth to that child. She had been the one responsible for keeping her safe. Instead, she had sold her to other people for drug money. "How much?" Lily blinked. Her eyes were unable to focus. "What? How much did you sell your daughter for?" "I did not sell her." Lily began to scratch at her arms. Her nails left red marks on her scarred skin. "It was not selling. It was just renting. It was temporary. She always comes back. She is a good girl. She knows how to be quiet." Dominic felt his vision become sharp. His hands clenched into fists. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to walk across that room and extinguish this woman's pathetic life. But Victor's hand clamped down on his shoulder, a firm and grounding weight. "She is not worth it," Victor murmured. "She is not worth the stain on your soul." Dominic took one deep breath, then another. He stared at Lily Sullivan and saw a person completely beyond saving. There was no remorse, no guilt, not even a flicker of understanding for what she had done. She was just an addict, annoyed that strangers were interrupting her misery while she waited for her next fix. "Take her away," he ordered. "She goes to mandatory rehab in a facility out of state. She is to have no contact with Emma. She will not come anywhere near Emma, not until I give the word." 2 of his men stepped forward. Lily put up no resistance. She didn't have the energy. "Where is Emma?" she mumbled as they pulled her up from the filthy mattress. "I need her. Marcus is going to be so mad if she's not here. She needs to work tonight." Dominic had to turn away. He could not stand the sight of her for another second. He moved through the apartment searching, looking for something he prayed he would not find. The closet door was ajar. He pushed it open. It was 3 feet wide and 4 feet deep, with no light and no air. A thin, crumpled blanket was balled up on the floor. Next to it was a stuffed rabbit, faded to gray with age and missing an ear. It had once been cherished, a very long time ago. Now it just looked exhausted. And then he saw the walls. They were covered in scratches, hundreds of them, gouged into the plaster by tiny fingernails, arranged in groups of 5. They were tally marks. Emma had been counting the days, the hours, the minutes, waiting for someone, anyone, to come and rescue her. Dominic bent down and picked up the little rabbit. As he held it in his hands, something deep inside him turned to solid stone. Marcus Kane was going to die. That was a certainty. But first, he was going to suffer. Marcus Kane knew something was terribly wrong the instant he turned onto Ashland Avenue. He had spent the entire night looking for Emma, checking all the usual places. He searched the alleys where the homeless kids huddled together. He checked the shelters that never asked too many questions, and the street corners where runaways tried to earn enough for a meal. She was gone. The girl had vanished into thin air. Now, climbing the stairs to his apartment at 7 in the morning, he could feel the wrongness settling deep in his bones. The front door was open. It was not just unlocked, it was hanging crookedly from its hinges. He drew his pistol and slipped inside. The apartment was completely ransacked, every drawer emptied, the mattress slashed and flipped over. Every single hiding place he had ever thought of had been discovered and torn apart. Lily was gone. Emma was gone. And spray painted in big black letters across the wall was one single word: Visquez. The blood in Marcus's veins turned to ice. He fumbled for his phone and dialed his contact in the Santos gang, his hands trembling. "It is Kane. I have a problem." "We know," the voice on the other end answered coldly. "Vasquez has your girl. The entire South Side is buzzing about it. I need your help. I need—" "You need to handle this," the voice snapped, cutting him off. "That girl has seen things. She was there for the Hernandez deal. She was at the warehouse during our meeting with Councilman Peters. She knows names. She knows faces." Marcus squeezed his eyes shut. He remembered it now, all the times he had brought Emma with him because having a kid around made people drop their guard. The time she sat quietly in the corner, just watching, as he took care of business. She had witnessed everything. "If she starts talking," the voice continued, "a lot of people are going to prison. Important people. People who are a lot more valuable to us than you are. She will not talk. She is 7 years old. She does not understand what she saw. Vasquez has her now. Do you think he is not going to ask her questions? Do you think he is not going to piece together what she knows?" There was a long silence. "Find that girl. You either silence her, or we will silence you. You have 48 hours. The line went dead. Marcus stood there alone in the ruins of his apartment and realized he had made a fatal mistake. 30 miles to the north, in a farmhouse nestled in the woods, Emma Sullivan opened her eyes. For a few seconds, she had no idea where she was. The room was filled with light. Sunshine was pouring through real windows that had real curtains. The bed she was lying on was soft, and the sheets were fresh and clean. The air smelled of lavender and baking bread. It was wrong. All of it felt completely wrong. Emma's heart started to pound in her chest, which grew tight until she could not breathe. She scrambled out of the bed and wedged herself into the corner of the room. She pressed her back flat against the wall, pulled her knees up to her chin, and wrapped her arms around herself. There was too much space, too much light. It was too quiet. Something terrible was about to happen. It always did. The door creaked open. Emma flinched, shrinking even further into the corner. A woman entered. She was older, maybe around 58 or 60, with short, practical silver hair. She had kind eyes and a face that looked like it had seen too much sorrow, but had chosen to smile anyway. She did not come closer. She did not say a word. She just sat down on the floor about 10 feet away from Emma, and she waited. The minutes ticked by. 5, then 10, then 15. The woman remained perfectly still. She did not fidget or try to break the silence with meaningless reassurances. She just sat there, as patient as a stone. After 20 minutes, Emma's voice broke the silence, cracking like thin ice. "Are you going to hit me?" "No," the woman said. "I will never hit you. Everyone says that." "I know," the woman replied, nodding her head slowly. "I understand completely why you do not believe me. Words are easy to say, and they do not mean much. I will prove it to you with my actions, not with promises." Emma watched her, searching for the lie, for the cruelty she knew was hiding somewhere. She could not find it. "Who are you?" "My name is Elena. This is my home. You are safe here." "Safe?" Emma repeated the word as if it were from a foreign language she had never heard before. Elena got to her feet slowly. She walked to the doorway and retrieved a tray that had been left just outside. On it was toast, eggs, a glass of orange juice, and a little bowl of fruit. She placed it in the center of the room, not so close that it felt like a threat, but not so far that it seemed like a trap. Then she went back to the door. "Eat whenever you feel ready. Take all the time you need." Then she left, leaving the door wide open. Emma stared at the food, then at the open door, and then back to the food again. She could not make sense of it. Why was she not locked in? Why was no one watching her? Why was she being given food without having to earn it? None of it was logical. But the scent of the warm meal drifted to her, and her stomach twisted with a painful hunger. Slowly, cautiously, she began to crawl toward the tray. 3 days went by at Elena's farmhouse. 3 days of fresh linens and hot meals and doors that were never locked. 3 days of sunlight streaming through windows and adults who spoke in gentle voices and never ever raised their hands. Emma did not trust a single moment of it. She ate the food they offered her, but only after she saw someone else eat from it first. She took the clean clothes they gave her but kept her old torn shirt hidden away under the mattress, just in case. And she would not sleep in the bed. Every night, she would crawl underneath it. The space was small and dark and enclosed. It was like the closet. It felt safe. Elena saw all of this but did not say anything. She knew that healing was a process that could never be rushed. There were 8 other children living at the farmhouse. Each one of them was broken in their own way, and each one of them was learning how to become whole again. Emma stayed away from them at first. She would sit in corners, just watching them, analyzing everything, waiting for the explosion of violence that she knew was bound to come, but it never came. On the 3rd day, a girl came over to her. She was older than Emma, about 9 years old, with dark braids, brown skin, and eyes that held the same deep weariness that Emma saw in her own reflection. "I am Maya." Emma did not answer. Maya sat down next to her, leaving a comfortable amount of space between them. She did not try to touch her. She did not ask any questions. She simply sat there. After a long moment of silence, she spoke again. "I used to sleep under the bed, too." Emma's head turned just a little. It was the first sign of interest she had shown in anyone. "My mom's boyfriend used to come into my room at night," Maya explained, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. "Under the bed was the only place he could not get to me." Emma understood. She understood perfectly. "How long have you been here?" she asked, her voice raspy from not being used. "2 years. Elena found me when I was 7. Just like you." "Do you have to work?" Maya's brow furrowed. "Work? To stay here? Do you have to deliver packages or do things for people?" The question lingered in the air like a foul poison. Maya shook her head slowly. "No, we do not have to do anything. We are just here. That is all. It makes no sense. I know. I did not understand it at first either." Emma hugged her knees even closer to her body. "So why does she have us here? What is in it for her?" Maya considered her question for a few seconds. Then she said something that stirred a feeling deep inside of Emma. "Elena always says that looking after kids is the only reward she needs. She tells us we do not owe her a thing, except to focus on getting well." Emma just stared at her. "This is what I have figured out," Maya went on. "Here, we get 3 meals a day. No one hits you here. No one will touch you in the dark. No one will ever lock you in a closet." She took a breath. "And you are allowed to cry. When you feel hurt, you can let it out. And nobody gets mad at you for it." That evening, Emma got under her bed like she always did. Maya slid in right next to her. They rested next to each other in the darkness, their shoulders nearly touching. "I have not cried in 2 years," Emma whispered. "The last time I did, Marcus broke my finger. He told me that only weak people cry. Marcus is not here anymore." "I know, so it is okay if you want to cry now." Emma was perfectly still for a long time. Then her body started to tremble. It was not because she was cold, but from a feeling buried far deeper, inside. The tears started as a trickle, then became a stream, and finally a flood. She wept for the darkness of the closet, for the sting of the burns, for the mother who traded her away, and for all the nights she was hungry, terrified, and all alone. For all the times she just wanted to vanish. Maya put her arms around Emma and held her close. She did not say a word. There was nothing to say. She just held on while the sobs quieted and Emma finally drifted off to sleep. The following afternoon, Dominic showed up. He lingered outside Emma's doorway, peering through the small opening. She was at a little table with crayons scattered in front of her, trying to draw on a sheet of paper. She had never even held a crayon before. She had no idea how to draw, but she was giving it her all. Elena came up beside him. She has been asking for you. Dominic looked over. What? She has a name for you. The man who makes the monsters go away. She was wondering where you had gone. Dominic remained quiet. She does not know your name, Elena said gently. You did not tell her. He gazed back into the room. Emma was focused intently on her drawing. Her little tongue was sticking out just a bit, a sure sign of deep concentration. He nudged the door open and walked in. Emma glanced up. For a second, neither of them said a word. Then, a change occurred in her green eyes. A light that had long been extinguished seemed to flicker on again. It was not trust, not quite, but it was the very first glimmer of hope. Dominic did not move closer right away. He recalled how his mother had interacted with Emma. She kept her distance, showed patience, and never crowded or overwhelmed her. He lowered himself to the floor, about 6 feet from the small table where Emma was busy with her drawing. He was near enough to speak, but far enough not to seem like a threat. Emma saw him get settled. Her muscles had tightened the moment he walked in, a reflex she could not control, but she did not back away into her usual corner. That was a good sign. Have you made Marcus disappear yet? Her question was blunt and detached, just like she always was. Not yet, Dominic replied with honesty. But I am going to. Emma thought about his answer. She went back to her drawing, scribbled a couple more lines, and then looked at him again. What is your name? Dominic. She attempted to say it back. Dominic. The sounds were awkward and stumbled out of her mouth. She scowled. Dominique. The faintest hint of a smile touched the corner of Dominic's mouth. He could not remember the last time he had even wanted to smile. It is a tough name, he confessed. Some people just call me Dom. Dom. Emma tried out the name. It felt short, simple, and easy to hold on to. I like that one more. Then Dom is what you can call me. She gave a little nod, looking content, and went back to her art. A comfortable silence settled over them, the kind that exists between two people who understand each other without speaking. A few moments later, Emma lifted her paper. I made this for you. Dominic leaned in a little to get a better look. The drawing was simple, with rough lines and basic shapes. Emma was new to crayons and did not know how to create a picture, but the meaning was perfectly clear. There were two figures, one tall figure in black crayon and a smaller one in yellow. The little figure was positioned behind the big one, as if hiding and being kept safe. This one is you, Emma explained, her finger pointing at the tall shape. And this is me. Dominic accepted the drawing gently, treating it like it was made of delicate glass. He looked at it for what felt like a very long time. A strange feeling bloomed in his chest. It was not the familiar, sharp pain of grief, but something else entirely. A warmth that seemed to thaw a part of him that had been frozen for years. 28 years ago, he had to watch his sister die. That left 28 years of guilt, anger, and a hollow feeling inside. And here was a 7-year-old girl with green eyes and a wounded spirit who had drawn him as her guardian. It is beautiful, he managed to say. His voice came out raspy with emotion. Emma cocked her head. You are not just saying that. I do not lie to children. Marcus lied constantly. I am not Marcus. Emma scanned his face, giving him that intense look she always did, searching for any sign that he was not telling the truth. She found nothing. Dominic's phone buzzed inside his pocket. He pulled it out. It was a text from Marco. It was urgent. Call me now. He got to his feet, making sure his movements were slow and steady. I need to step out and handle something important. I will be back. Emma's eyes widened for a split second, a quick spark of fear that she immediately tried to hide. Do you promise? The question seemed to float in the space between them. Dominic looked down at this little girl who had endured things that would have shattered most grown-ups. This little girl who had walked through a nightmare to get to him. This little girl who had sketched a picture of him as her protector. I promise. The words escaped him before he could think, before he could call back all the reasons he gave up on promises 15 years ago. Promises could be shattered. Promises built up hopes that could be dashed. Promises were like weapons that could be used against you. But staring into Emma's face, seeing the flicker of hope she fought so hard to conceal, he could not bring himself to say anything else. "I promise I will be back." Emma gave a slow nod. She squeezed the one-eared rabbit to her chest, the same one he had found in her closet. Dominic left the room and immediately called Marco. "Talk to me. Santos just put a price on the girl's head. $50,000 for whoever can find her." Dominic's jaw clenched. "Why?" "I did some more digging. 3 months ago, Marcus took Emma with him to a meeting in a warehouse on the west side. She was just sitting in a corner, quiet, like she was not even there. Nobody paid her any attention." "What kind of meeting?" "A delivery. Marcus was dropping off a large amount of cash to a police officer. Detective Raymond Garza, from the Vice Squad. He has been taking money from Santos for years." Emma saw and heard it all, the names, the dollar amounts, the dates. Dominic shut his eyes. A 7-year-old girl had stumbled into being the only witness to a huge web of police corruption. It made perfect sense why Santos wanted her gone. "Find Garza," Dominic ordered, "and find Marcus. Then I want you to double the security at the farmhouse. I want that farmhouse locked down. Nobody gets within a mile, understand?" He ended the call and glanced back through the window. Emma was right where he had left her, still at the table, looking at the empty doorway, holding on to that little rabbit and waiting for him to come back like he promised. He would, regardless of the price. At 9 o'clock that night, inside the Obsidian, every high-ranking member of the Vasquez organization was seated at the large black oak table. There were 14 men in all. These were the exact same men who had seen a small, barefoot child wander into their meeting only 3 days ago. Dominic remained standing at the head of the table. He did not take a seat. This was not going to be a negotiation. "Emma Sullivan is now under the protection of this family." His words dropped into the quiet room with the weight of granite. "If anyone harms her, they are harming me. If anyone so much as threatens her, they will have to answer directly to me. This is not up for discussion. It is not a suggestion. It is now the law." The room was silent. The men looked at each other. They had been with Dominic for many years. They were aware of his strict rules concerning children. They all knew the story of Isabella. But this was on another level. This was basically declaring war on Santos, all for a 7-year-old girl that none of them knew before 3 days ago. When the meeting was over, Victor found Dominic by himself in his office. "You realize you are about to go to war with Santos. And for what? A little girl you met just 72 hours ago." Dominic poured some whiskey into a glass. He did not take a drink, he just held it. "I am simply upholding a rule that I established 15 years ago. Santos has 300 soldiers. They manage the entire drug operation from Chicago to Detroit. They have police officers on their payroll and judges in their pockets, and we are challenging them over a single child. If I bend my own rule because Santos scares me," Dominic cut in, "then the rule is meaningless. It was never real to begin with, just empty words." He placed his glass on the table. "Isabella is gone because our father believed rules could be bent. He thought some lives were less important than holding on to power. I made a promise to myself I would never become that man." Victor looked at his boss, his friend, the man who was the closest thing he had to a brother. "I just had to be sure you knew what this would cost." "I know." Victor gave a single nod. "In that case, I am with you until the very end." 2 hours later, Dominic's car stopped in front of a warehouse on the west side of Chicago. This was Santos territory. He entered by himself. Carlos El Lobo Mendez was sitting at a table with 8 armed men surrounding him. He was 53 years old, a heavy man with a graying beard and cold eyes that had seen men die without so much as a flinch. He cracked a smile as Dominic came in. "Vasquez, showing up in my part of town alone. You have either lost your mind or you have lost your edge. He leaned back. I have been hearing that you are looking after some kid who is stirring up problems about a little girl. That is not the Dominic I used to know. Dominic came to a halt 10 feet from the table. Marcus Kane hurt a child in my territory. He made her move his product. He let other men pay to put their hands on her. That is a direct violation of my rules. Your rules mean nothing to my men. They apply to everyone living in Chicago. Mendez let out a laugh. The girl is aware of too much. She witnessed things. She heard names. She is a risk. She is 7 years old. She is a witness. And witnesses have a way of disappearing. That is how this business works. Dominic's tone remained unchanged. It did not get louder. It did not break. Just try to make it was a force you could not buy, threaten, or negotiate with. This was not a dispute over turf. This was not a matter of business. This was entirely personal. And when things got personal, men became unpredictable and dangerous. Mendes leaned back in his chair, slowly moving his hands away from his weapon. Marcus Kane is my headache. I will handle it. The girl is your problem. Make sure she stays quiet. She will not talk. And how can you be sure of that? Dominic turned to leave. Because there will be nothing left to say. He walked out of the room without a backward glance. Mendes watched him go, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. That man is going to be a problem, one of his guards whispered. Mendes remained silent. He was already calculating the cost of a war with Vasquez. For now, it was too high. But the girl remained a loose end. And loose ends often had a way of tying themselves up. 3:12 in the morning, 5 days after the meeting with Mendes. Marcus Kane was crouched in the trees behind Elena's farmhouse, his eyes fixed on the windows, searching for any sign of movement. He did not trust Mendes. He did not trust anyone. The Santos boss had ordered him to back off, to let the situation cool down, to be patient. But Marcus was done being patient. That little girl had destroyed everything. His business, his reputation, and his own safety. Every day she remained alive was one more day she could expose him. He had hired 4 men from out of town, freelancers who worked for cash and did not ask questions. They had no ties to Santos, and no loyalty to anyone but their payment. Finding the farmhouse had set him back $10,000. A guard on Vasquez's payroll, who clearly valued money more than his life, had sold him the location. Now Marcus watched his team move through the woods, like shadows among shadows, approaching the house from the back where the security was lightest. Inside the farmhouse, Emma's eyes flew open. She was not sure what had woken her. It might have been a sound, or just a feeling, the same instinct that had kept her alive in Marcus's apartment for 2 years. Something was terribly wrong. She lay perfectly still under the bed, listening. Maya slept peacefully beside her, her breathing soft and even. Then she saw it. A shadow moving outside the window, silhouetted against the moonlight. Emma did not scream or panic. Her body automatically shifted into survival mode. She reached over and gently covered Mia's mouth, shaking her awake. Mia's eyes opened wide. Emma put a finger to her own lips. "They are here," she whispered. No questions, no hesitations. Maya understood instantly. The 2 girls crawled out from under the bed and crept into the hallway. Their bare feet were silent on the wooden floor. Elena's room was at the very end of the hall. Emma knocked softly on the door, once, then twice. The door opened immediately. Elena was standing there in her nightgown, her eyes wide awake and alert. She had not been sleeping either. "How many?" she asked in a low voice. "I saw one outside my window. There might be more." Elena moved with purpose. Decades of living this kind of life had taught her to react without thinking. She pressed a button concealed behind a painting on the wall. It was a silent alarm. It would alert Dominic and Victor right away. Wake the others, be quiet, bring them to the kitchen. 3 minutes later, 8 children were standing in the kitchen, sleepy and bewildered, but completely silent. They had all been taught not to make a sound when an adult told them to be quiet. Elena opened a hidden door behind the pantry. Stone steps disappeared down into the darkness. Everyone get down there now. Stick together. Do not make a sound. The children made their way down the stairs. Emma was the last one, helping the younger children with their footing. Elena grabbed Maya's arm and pushed a phone into her hand. If anyone who is not me comes down those stairs, you call the only number in this phone. Do you understand? Maya nodded. Her face was pale, but her expression was firm. Elena pulled the hidden door shut, just as the front door of the house splintered inward. 4 men rushed inside, their guns drawn, their faces hidden by black masks. Elena stood in the living room, blocking their path to the kitchen. There is no one here except me. One of the men let out a laugh. Nice try, old woman. We know about the children. We know about the girl. He hit her across the face with the back of his hand. Elena stumbled against the wall but managed to stay on her feet. A trickle of blood ran from her split lip. Search everywhere, the man commanded. Find her. They tore the house apart, searching bedrooms, bathrooms, and closets. They discovered empty beds. They found toys and clothing and clear signs of children, but they could not find the children themselves. Then, Marcus Kane stepped through the shattered doorway. He stared at Elena with cold, empty eyes. Where is Emma? She is gone. Far away from here. You will never find her. Marcus covered the distance between them in 3 steps. He grabbed Elena by the throat and slammed her hard against the wall. Do not lie to me, old woman. Where is she? In the basement. Emma heard Elena cry out in pain. She looked at Maya, at the other children huddled together in the dark, and at the phone shaking in Maya's hand. Victor was on his way. 8 minutes away, maybe less. But 8 minutes was an eternity. Elena would be dead in 8 minutes. Emma made a choice. She stood up and walked toward the stairs. Emma, no, Maya hissed. But Emma was already climbing. She pushed the hidden door open and stepped out into the kitchen. Then she walked into the living room, where Marcus was holding Elena against the wall, his hand tight around her throat. I am here. Every head in the room turned. Emma stood there in her pajamas, looking small, thin, and fragile, staring at the man who had tormented her for 2 years. Let her go. I am the one you want. Marcus shoved Elena aside and turned to face Emma. His eyes burned with a cold rage. After 2 years of controlling this child, 2 years of using her, she had run to the one man in Chicago who could bring his entire world down. You have caused me a great deal of trouble, little girl. Emma stood her ground in the doorway, her arms at her sides, her chin held high. She did not run. She did not cry. She had cried all of her tears a very long time ago. I know. Marcus crossed the room in 3 long strides. His hand shot out and grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her clear off her feet. Emma gasped, but she did not scream. You are coming home with me, Marcus hissed, his face just inches from hers. And this time, you are going to learn how to stay quiet for good. Behind him, Elena struggled to get up. One of the masked men kicked her in the stomach. She collapsed to the floor, fighting for breath. Emma looked at Marcus, into the eyes of the man who had burned her, starved her, and locked her in closets, the man who let strangers touch her for money. And for the first time in his presence, she felt something new. It was not fear. It was certainty. Dom will kill you. Marcus laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. Vasquez? He does not care about you. You are nothing, just a skinny little drug runner. Why would the most powerful man in Chicago risk a single thing for a piece of trash like you? Emma's voice was steady and clear, the voice of someone who was speaking an absolute truth. You do not know anything about him. For a moment, something flickered in Marcus's eyes. A hint of doubt. The confidence in her voice did not fit the situation. It did not match what he expected from a terrified child. Before he could answer, the night exploded. Gunfire erupted from outside. Automatic weapons, screams, and the sounds of dying men echoed through the night. Victor showed up just 6 minutes after the silent alarm, a speed that was not humanly possible. He had shattered every traffic law in Chicago to reach this place. His team descended upon the farmhouse like a raging storm. The 4 hired thugs were neutralized in a matter of seconds. They were expecting a defenseless old woman and some kids, not a team of professional soldiers. Marcus whirled around and headed for the back door, yanking Emma along with him. She was now his bargaining chip, his only way out. Victor materialized in the hallway with his gun raised, his face an emotionless mask of stone. He had a perfect shot at Marcus's head, but Emma was blocking the way. Marcus kept her positioned in front of him, one arm locked around her throat as he shuffled toward the exit. "Don't take another step," Marcus yelled, "or I will break her neck." Victor remained motionless. His weapon did not waver. His eyes followed every single one of Marcus's moves. Emma looked over at Victor. For a moment their eyes locked. And in that instant, Emma grasped the entire situation. She knew Victor couldn't risk a shot. She knew Marcus would use her to escape unless she did something. She was only 7 years old, yet she was analyzing the angles like a seasoned warrior. She knew exactly what she needed to do. It was a lesson learned from 2 years of living in the middle of violence. She used the only weapon she had ever had, her teeth. Emma twisted her head and sank her teeth into Marcus's arm, using every bit of strength her small body could muster. She bit down hard until she could taste blood, until she felt the flesh give way. Marcus roared in pain, his hold on her faltering for just a fraction of a second. A fraction of a second was all she needed. Emma lunged to the side, dropping to the floor and rolling clear. Victor fired a single shot. The bullet struck Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around and forcing him to his knees. His pistol skittered across the wooden floor. Victor moved in, his weapon still aimed, and loomed over the bleeding man. "My boss will be the one to decide your fate." Marcus looked up, desperately trying to stop the blood that was pouring from between his fingers. "She's just a child. Why would Vasquez even care about some worthless kid?" Victor's face remained a cold, hard mask. "You could never understand." Leaning against the wall, Emma hugged her knees tightly to her chest. Her body began to tremble. The rush of adrenaline was gone, replaced by the terrifying reality of what had just happened. For the first time all night she was shaking, but she was alive, and Marcus was never going to hurt her again. Dominic's car flew through the darkness at 100 miles per hour. He was 20 minutes away when the alarm was triggered. Those 20 minutes had stretched into what felt like 20 years. Victor's voice came over the phone, calm and completely steady. "We have her. She is safe. Marcus is in our custody." Safe. She was safe. But Dominic didn't ease up on the gas until he screeched into the farmhouse driveway, seeing the house lit up and his men guarding every possible entrance. He stepped through the ruined front door. The living room was completely destroyed. There was broken furniture everywhere, blood staining the floor, and bullet holes riddling the walls, all evidence of the brutal violence that had almost taken another child. He found Emma in the kitchen. She was huddled in a corner with her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Elena was right there with her, an arm draped over Emma's shoulders, a dark bruise forming on her cheek and dried blood on her lip. They were both beaten up, but they were both alive. Dominic walked across the room and knelt before Emma. "I am sorry." The words caught in his throat. "I am so sorry I was late." Emma looked up at him, her green eyes seeming huge in her small, pale face. She watched him with the same careful scrutiny she always used, checking for any hint of a lie, any sign of betrayal. She saw nothing but sincerity. All at once, she threw herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck so tightly it almost sent him tumbling backward. She held on with a desperate grip, her little body shaking as she buried her face into his shoulder. And then, the tears came. These were not the quiet, hidden tears he had seen from her before. This was something else entirely. This was the sound of a child who had finally, at long last, reached a place of safety. It was the sound of years of accumulated pain being released all at once. Dominic put his arms around her, being careful and gentle, and just held her. He had not held a child since Isabella, not for 28 years. He had avoided it on purpose, finding the reminder of his loss too much to handle. But as he held Emma, he felt a change deep inside him. A part of his heart that had been frozen solid for almost 3 decades started to melt. "You came," Emma choked out between sobs. "You actually came. I made you a promise. No one ever keeps their promises." "I do." He stayed with her until the tears subsided, until her breathing returned to normal, until she finally fell asleep right there in his arms, completely drained. Then, he gently carried her to a bedroom, placed her on a fresh bed, and pulled a warm blanket over her. He stood there for a long time, just watching her sleep. After that, he went to take care of Marcus Kane. The warehouse was deserted and empty, making it the ideal spot for a conversation that no one would ever hear. Marcus was tied to a chair, his shoulder poorly bandaged, and his face was white from the loss of blood. 2 of Dominic's men stood guard, but Dominic sent them away with a wave of his hand. He needed to do this alone. He grabbed a chair and sat down facing Marcus, so close that he could see the fear in his eyes. "Do you have any idea who Isabella Vasquez was?" Marcus just shook his head. His teeth were chattering, partly from the cold, partly from fear, and partly from the certainty that he was not going to make it out of this room alive. "She was my sister," Dominic said, his voice low. "My twin. She was only 8 years old when she was taken from us. They forced me to watch. They treated her like a tool, a piece of leverage, something to be thrown away once she was no longer of use." He leaned in closer. "You did the exact same thing to Emma. You treated a child like an object. You sold her, you burned her, you broke her. You decided she was worthless because she was small and had no power." Marcus struggled to get the words out. "I did not know she had a connection to you. I swear I did not." "It would not have made a difference," Dominic cut him off. "Every child has a connection to me. Every single child in this city is my responsibility. That is the rule I established after Isabella was gone. The rule that you broke." He got to his feet. "My sister was never given justice. No one was ever held accountable. Our father allowed her killers to go free because starting a war was too costly." Dominic drew his gun. "I am not my father." A single shot. It was clean. It was final. Marcus Kane's body slumped forward. He was gone before he even knew what happened. Dominic put his weapon away and walked out of the warehouse. The night air felt cold and fresh. He called Victor. "It is finished. Clean this up and send a message to Santos." "What message?" Dominic gazed up at the stars. "That nobody touches my children, ever." A week after the assault, the farmhouse was abandoned. Dominic had relocated everyone to a new place, a property that was not listed on any map. It was a location with stronger security, taller fences, and guards who were always awake. The children settled in quickly. They had all been taught how to relocate at a moment's notice, how to leave a place behind without a second glance. It was a common survival tactic among them. Emma settled in as well, but in a different way. She would not let Elena leave her sight. When Elena went to the kitchen, Emma was right behind her. When Elena walked to the garden, Emma watched her from the window. If Elena was gone for longer than a minute, Emma's breathing would grow shallow and fast. Her eyes would fix on the door, and she could not settle down until the older woman came back. The only other person Emma allowed near was Maya. The 2 girls had been glued to each other since the night of the attack. They shared a room, they ate every meal together, and they spoke in a secret language made of quiet looks and tiny gestures that only other survivors could ever know. Dr. Sarah Chen started coming every other day. She worked with Emma slowly, taking great care to build a foundation of trust, one visit at a time. After 2 weeks of watching Emma, she shared her findings with Dominic. She has complex PTSD, an attachment disorder, and cognitive delays from having no education. She is 7 years old, but her emotions jump between a frightened toddler and a 40-year-old war veteran. There is nothing in between. Dominic took in the news without a word. The good news, Dr. Chen went on, is that she is resilient, incredibly so. With steady care, therapy, and a stable life, she has a chance to heal. But it is going to take years, maybe even decades, and she cannot have any more interruptions. No more interruptions. Dominic would personally see to that. 3 weeks after the attack, Lily Sullivan asked for a meeting. The required rehabilitation program had done its job. 3 weeks clean of heroin had lifted the heavy fog from her brain. She was able to think clearly again, to feel again, and the main thing she felt was a deep, aching need. I want to see my daughter. Dominic sat facing her in a cold, sterile conference room at the rehab center. His expression was a blank wall. No, she is my child. I have my rights. You sold your daughter for drug money. You let other men pay for the chance to touch her. You lost every right you thought you had. Lily started to weep, the tears running down her gaunt cheeks, her hands twisted together in a desperate plea. I was sick. I had no idea what I was doing. I need her. She is the only thing I have left. Please. Dominic watched her closely. He saw the tears. He heard the begging, but he also saw the truth that was hiding underneath it all. Lily did not want Emma out of love. She wanted Emma because Emma was her excuse, her reason to exist. Without a daughter to look after, she would be forced to look at herself. That was not love. It was just desperation disguised as affection. My mother will come speak with you. He got up and left the room. Elena came in and took his seat. She offered no words of comfort. She did not try to soften the blow. Do you have any idea where Emma slept for 2 years? Lily just shook her head. She slept in a closet that was 3 feet wide. There was no light. She had no blanket, only a thin sheet that she had found in a trash can. Lily's face collapsed in on itself. Do you know the last time she ever went to school? There was no answer. She was 5. She does not know how to read. She cannot write her own name. She does not know when her birthday is. She does not even know her full name. Elena leaned in closer. Do you know the last time someone told her, I love you? The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating. Emma will not be seeing you until you can prove you are worthy of being in her life. That could take years. It could be forever. That is not up to me or my son to decide. That will be Emma's decision to make when she is old enough. Lily broke down sobbing. What am I supposed to do? Get better. Not for Emma. Do it for yourself, because you owe that much to the person you were before the drugs completely took over. 2 days after that, Lily was moved to a long-term treatment center in a different state, a long way from Chicago and a long way from Emma. She left without ever seeing her daughter, and Emma never brought her up, not even one time. She never asked where her mother had gone, never wondered if she was still alive, never questioned if she would return. It was as if Lily Sullivan had never even been real. And that quiet, that total lack of interest in the woman who brought her into the world, was the most devastating part of the whole thing. 2 months went by. The world outside began to change. Winter finally loosened its hold on Chicago. The snow turned to slush, and then the slush dried up into firm earth. The sun stayed out a little longer every day. And Emma started to change too. It began with learning to read. A private tutor, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, who was an expert in helping children with trauma, came to the house 3 times a week. She never pushed. She never applied any pressure. She just sat next to Emma and showed her the alphabet, one letter at a time. Emma's mind, now that it was not busy with just trying to survive, turned out to be incredibly thirsty for knowledge. She soaked up information the way dry ground soaks up a spring rain. Letters turned into sounds. Sounds turned into words, and words began to have meaning. 6 weeks into her lessons, she spoke her first written word out loud. Safe. She turned to look at Mrs. Patterson. What does this mean? It means you are protected. It means that no one can harm you. It means you can stop being afraid. Emma gazed at the new word for a very long time. I have never seen this word before. Mrs. Patterson remained silent. What could she possibly say? This was a child who had never learned the word safe because she had never once felt it. Dominic started visiting every weekend. He would show up on Saturday afternoon and not leave until Sunday evening. He never gave grand speeches or tried to fill the quiet with meaningless chatter. He just shared the same space with Emma, allowing her to get used to him being there. They slowly fell into a routine. Dominic would bring a book, always something simple. They started with picture books, then moved on to stories with more words. He would sit on the couch, while Emma sat on the floor close by, just listening to the sound of his voice as he read. But one Saturday, she broke the pattern. Instead of going to her spot on the floor, she walked right up to the couch and paused. Can I sit up there with you? Dominic looked down at this little girl, a child who had survived by sleeping in closets and hiding in corners, who jumped at any sudden noise, and who trusted absolutely no one. Yes. She climbed up and settled next to him. They did not touch, and she left a careful space between them, but they were on the same level, equals. Dominic opened the book and started reading. He did not smile, but a subtle change came over his face. Something hard inside him began to soften. From the doorway, Victor watched it all unfold. He saw the change in his boss, how the ice around him was thawing and the walls were starting to crumble. He turned and quietly walked away. Some moments are too sacred for anyone else to see. A series of small changes began to add up. Emma started calling Elena grandma instead of the lady or she. The word felt clumsy in her mouth at first, like she was testing it, expecting to be corrected. But Elena just smiled warmly and said, Yes, my dear. The drawing Emma had made during her first week, a simple sketch of a tall man and a small girl, was now kept under her pillow. She would look at it every single night before she went to sleep. Emma and Maya had become true sisters in every way that counted. They chose to share a room. They would tell each other secrets long after the lights went out. They shared knowledge that no child should ever have, and together they began to heal. Then came the official business. The court had officially terminated Lily Sullivan's rights as a parent. The case against her was undeniable. It included neglect, abuse, endangerment, and even using a minor in drug trafficking. Emma needed a legal guardian. Elena brought it up over dinner on Sunday, waiting until after Emma had gone upstairs to bed. I want to formally adopt her. Dominic put his fork down. You would be a wonderful mother for her. That is not what I am asking. She needs a stable home. You can give her that. Elena leaned forward and placed her hand over her son's. Dominic, this is not about who is the most qualified. I am asking if you want to be a father to this little girl. He did not reply right away. His mind went to Isabella, to the vow he made at her graveside, to the strict rule he had set for himself, and the war he almost started because of it. He thought of Emma, of her bright green eyes and her silent bravery, and the way she drew him as the man who kept her safe. He thought about what was ahead. His own future. A future he had always believed would be empty, cold, and spent alone. I do not know how to be a father. No one ever does, until they become one. Dominic glanced up the stairs, toward the room where Emma was sleeping. What if I let her down? Elena gave his hand a gentle squeeze. But what if you do not? Dominic gave his mother no answer that night. He drove back into the city in total silence, the question turning over and over in his head like a heavy stone he could not set down. 3 days went by. He managed his entire empire. He went to meetings. He made choices that impacted hundreds of people's lives. But hiding beneath every single conversation, every deal, and every order he gave, that one question remained. Do you want to be a father to this little girl? He sat by himself in his dark office, just staring at the wall. His world was never designed for a child. He was a killer, a criminal, a man who had greenlit executions and had watched people die without even a flinch. His hands were covered in stains that could never be washed away. He had powerful enemies who would not hesitate to use anyone he cared about to hurt him. He knew what happened when strong men showed they had a weakness. He had seen it firsthand. It was the very reason Isabella had died. How could he possibly pull a child into that kind of darkness? How could he promise to keep Emma safe when safety was a luxury he could never truly have? And then, the memories came flooding back. He saw Isabella's face, her smile with the missing tooth, and heard her calling him Dom because his full name was too long for her to say. He recalled the promise he swore on her grave, that no other child would ever suffer under his watch, that he would become the protector his own father never was. And he remembered Emma. He saw her walking into his club, her feet bare and bleeding, asking if he was the one who made the bad men go away. He remembered how she offered to work for him, because that was the only way she knew how to get protection. He remembered how she came up from the basement to confront Marcus, willing to give herself up to protect Elena. Emma was not just living in his territory anymore. She was living in his heart. And that single fact changed absolutely everything. On the fourth day, Dominic drove back to the house. He found Emma sitting in the garden on a little wooden bench, watching butterflies flutter around the spring blossoms. Mia was standing not far away, but Dominic asked if he could have a moment alone with Emma. Mia nodded and left. Emma did not move. Dominic sat down next to her on the bench. Their feet hung at different levels. His easily touched the grass, while hers swung freely in the air. Emma, I need to ask you something important. She turned her head to face him. Her green eyes had seen far too much for a child. Her face was already used to expecting pain. Would you want to come live with me and Grandma Elena? Not just here. In a real home. A home that would be yours forever. Emma's face showed no emotion. She was thinking, analyzing, trying to find the catch. You want me to stay with you? I want you to be part of my family. A long silence hung in the air between them. Then she started asking questions. They were careful and direct. The kind of questions a child asks when they have learned that nothing in life is free. I will not have to work? No. I will not have to deliver things? Never. I will not have to do things for men? Dominic's heart completely broke. Never. Not in a million years. Not for anybody. I just have to be here? That is all. He slowly reached out, giving her plenty of time to move away, and took her tiny hand into his. You just have to be my daughter. That is your only job. Emma looked down at their hands together. His was large and covered in scars. Hers was small and delicate. And then her expression crumbled. The tears started to flow. But these were not the silent, scared tears he had seen before. These were different. They came from a place deep inside her, a place that had been locked up for years. She was crying because someone actually wanted her, not for what she could do for them or what they could get from her. They just wanted her for her. I want to, she whispered between sobs. I really want to. She threw her little arms around his neck. Dominic caught her and pulled her into a tight hug. And then, something happened that had not occurred in 28 years. Tears began to fall from his own eyes. They streamed down his face and landed in Emma's hair. And for once, he made no effort to stop them. The ghost. The man who never left a trail. The boss who never showed any weakness. He just sat there in the sunlit garden, holding a 7-year-old girl in his arms. And he wept. He cried for Isabella, the one he had failed to save. He cried for Emma, the one he could. He cried for the man he used to be, and for the man he was slowly becoming. The adoption took 4 months to finalize. By all normal accounts, it should have taken much longer. There were background checks, home inspections, court dates, and mandatory waiting periods. The entire system was built to be slow and cautious, to protect children from bad decisions. But Dominic Vasquez had lawyers who knew exactly which judges to talk to. He had city officials who were in his debt. He had the kind of resources that could slice through all the red tape like a hot knife through butter. It was not really corruption. It was just efficiency. The kind of efficiency a person develops after decades of working in the gray area between what is legal and what is not. On a beautiful Tuesday morning in June, Emma Grace Sullivan officially became Emma Grace Vasquez. The courtroom was a small space with wood-paneled walls, an American flag standing in the corner, and a judge who smiled as she signed the last of the documents. Dominic wore his finest black vest over a crisp white shirt. He did not wear a tie. He never did. Emma wore a new blue dress. Blue had somehow become her favorite color these last few months. It was the color of the sky on a perfect day. It was the color of feeling safe. After the judge announced that the adoption was complete, Emma looked straight up at Dominic. "What should I call you now? You can call me whatever you want." She thought about it for a moment, her brow furrowed in deep concentration, the same way it did when she was trying to sound out a difficult word. "Can I call you Dad?" Dominic felt his throat tighten. It had been 28 years since he had even let himself imagine hearing that word. It had been 28 years since Isabella was gone, and he had promised himself he would never have another child. He would never risk loving someone who could be stolen from him again. He could not find the words to speak, so he just nodded. A genuine smile spread across Emma's face, the kind that lit up her eyes and changed her entire expression. "Okay, Dad." Standing behind them, Elena was quietly wiping away tears. Victor stood near the door with his arms crossed, his face a perfect mask of indifference, but his eyes were glistening. Life soon fell into a brand new rhythm. Emma moved in with Elena for good. It was far safer than any of Dominic's properties, much quieter, and a better place to raise a child. But Dominic was there every day. Every single day. He would model, come in the afternoon, and would stay for dinner. He helped her with her homework. He read her stories at bedtime. He started learning skills he never thought he would need. Elena showed him how to braid hair. It took him 2 whole weeks to get a simple braid right. His big hands felt clumsy handling the tiny strands of hair. Emma would sit there with amazing patience while he tried, never once complaining when he accidentally pulled too hard or had to begin again for the 5th time. Emma, in turn, taught him how to make pancakes. She burned 4 whole batches before they made one that could be eaten. The kitchen was thick with smoke. The smoke detector went off twice. Elena had to rush to open every single window. Emma just laughed through all of it. To Dominic, it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Maya was adopted as well. Elena would not even consider splitting up the girls. They had discovered each other in the worst of times, and now they would get to grow up together in the light. The first time Emma called Dominic Dad to another person was in front of Victor. They were all in the living room. Victor was there to give a report. Emma came running down the stairs, waving a sheet of paper. Dad, look at my spelling test. I got all of them right." She launched herself at Dominic, and he caught her with ease. Victor just stood there in the doorway, completely frozen. "Dad." The words seemed to just hang there in the room. Dominic looked over at his most loyal soldier, his oldest friend, and he saw a crack form behind those cold blue eyes. Victor turned around and left without saying anything. Elena found him a little later, just sitting on the porch and staring off into space. "Are you okay?" "I have known him for 20 years," Victor said in a low voice. "I have never once seen him look happy. Not a single time. Not until she came along." 1 year after the adoption papers were signed, Emma came home with a reading test. It was a perfect score. She had been the slowest reader in her entire class when she first started. The little girl who did not know her letters. The little girl who had never even held a book. And now, she was at the top of her class. She burst through the front door, The paper squeezed tightly in her hand, and she found Dominic in the living room. Dad, I did it. I can read everything now. She jumped right into his arms. Dominic hugged her and looked down at the test. It was covered in red check marks, a perfect score, and a gold star sticker. He folded it up with great care and tucked it into his wallet. He knew he would carry it with him for the rest of his days. 3 years went by. Emma turned 10. She was now in the 4th grade, catching up with the other kids her age, and sometimes even leaving them behind. She had made friends, she had a family, she had a life that the 7-year-old girl who showed up at Hell's Door could have never even dreamed of. And then, Lily Sullivan came back into their lives. The letter came through Dominic's lawyers. It was formal, polite, and every word was carefully chosen. Lily had been clean for 2 years. She had finished her rehabilitation program. She had started a new life in a new state. And now, she wanted to see her daughter. Dominic's first reaction was to say no. He crushed the letter into a ball in his fist and hurled it across the room. 3 years of healing, 3 years of making progress, 3 years of watching Emma finally learn how to smile and laugh and trust people again. He was not going to let that woman ruin it all. But Dr. Chen advised him to be patient. Emma needs to be the one to close this chapter, on her own terms, not on yours. She is 10 years old. She is also a survivor of incredible trauma. If you take this choice away from her, it will create questions that she will have to carry with her for the rest of her life. Let her be the one to decide. Dominic brought the topic up with Emma that weekend. They were sitting in the garden, their special spot, on the same bench where he had first asked her if she wanted to be part of his family. Your birth mother would like to see you. Emma's face became very still. It was that old stillness, the stillness she used for survival. Why? She says that she is doing better now. She has been clean for 2 years. She wants to say she is sorry. Do I have to see her? No. You do not ever have to do anything that you do not want to do. This is completely your choice. Emma looked out at the flowers, at the butterflies flitting by, at the bright blue sky. She thought about it for a whole week. Then, she went to Dominic with her decision. I want to see her. There is one question that I need to ask her. The meeting was set up at a neutral place, a quiet office with plain walls and comfortable chairs. Dr. Chen was there. Dominic was there too. He sat off in a corner watching everything, ready to put a stop to it all. The second Emma looked upset, it would be over. Lily Sullivan came in. She looked like a different person, much healthier. Her face had filled out. Her eyes were bright and clear. Her hair was clean and neatly brushed. She had on simple clothes and was not wearing any makeup. She looked like the person she could have been in a different life. Before all the drugs, before Marcus, before it all went wrong. The moment she saw Emma, she burst into tears. Oh, baby, you are so big. You are so beautiful. Emma did not budge. She stayed in her chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face calm and unreadable. She watched her birth mother weep with the kind of distance you would use to watch a total stranger. Sit down, Emma said. I have a question. Lily sat down in the chair across from her daughter, her face still wet with tears. Was streaming down her face, her hands shaking. Ask me whatever you want, please. I will tell you anything. Emma looked straight into her mother's eyes. Why did you not protect me? The question landed with the weight of a stone dropped into a quiet pond. Lily's face twisted in pain. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She tried again. I was unwell. The drugs made me unwell. I was not able to think straight. I could not see what was happening. I was so deep in my addiction that I could not. You let Marcus burn me. I know. You let him lock me in closets. I know. You let men pay money to touch me. Lily finally shattered. She bent over, sobbing uncontrollably and struggling to breathe. I am sorry. I am so, so sorry. There are no words I can say. Nothing could ever be enough. I was your mother and I let you down. I let you down in every possible way. Emma just watched her cry. There was no anger or hatred in her gaze, only a deep, ancient wisdom that seemed out of place on a 10-year-old's face. I forgive you. Lily looked up, her expression one of complete disbelief. But I will not forget, and I do not want to live with you. I have a family now, a true family. I have a dad who keeps me safe, a grandma who loves me, a sister who gets me. She stood up. I hope you can build a good life, not for my sake, but for your own. Because you should be more than what the drugs turned you into. Lily nodded slowly, the tears still falling. You are so strong, much stronger than I ever was. I had to be. Emma walked over to Dominic and took his hand. As they reached the door, she glanced back one last time. Goodbye, Lily. Not Mom, not Mother, just Lily, a stranger who had given birth to her and nothing else. They left together, father and daughter, and never looked back. 8 years down the road, Emma Vasquez was 25 years old. She was in her office, located on the third floor of a restored building in the heart of Chicago. The plaque on the door said, Isabella's Light Foundation. It was named for a girl who had passed away at 8 years old, named for the sister Dominic had lost. It was named for the very reason he became the man who saved Emma's life. The foundation had already helped more than 500 children get out of situations just like the one Emma had endured. 500 children who might have been otherwise lost. 500 children who now had someone ready to fight for them. The clock on her wall read 2:30 in the morning. Emma was still at her desk. She frequently worked these late hours. The children who needed help the most rarely followed a 9-to-5 schedule. Her phone started to ring. It was the emergency hotline. The line that was never closed. Isabella's Light. How may I help you? A shaky, frightened breath. Then a small voice, the voice of a child, a little boy. Are you the person who makes bad people go away? Emma's heart stopped. 18 years collapsed into a single moment. She was 7 years old again, standing in front of a door, barefoot and bleeding, asking a stranger the very same question. Yes, she said softly. I am. My name is Lucas. I am 6. My stepdad is trying to find me. My mom cannot help. She is scared too. I am hiding in a bathroom at a gas station. Please. I do not know what else to do. Emma was already in motion. Lucas, listen to me. You are going to be okay. Stay hidden. Do not make a sound. I am sending people to you right now. They will be there in 20 minutes. Can you stay safe for 20 minutes? I think so. You are being so brave. You are the bravest boy I have ever talked to. She dispatched her rapid response team. It was a unit funded by sources Dominic never formally recognized. It was made up of former soldiers and former police officers, people who knew how to get children out of dangerous situations without leaving a single trace. 20 minutes later, Lucas was safe. Emma met the team at the Foundation's intake center. The boy was wrapped in a blanket, clutching a cup of warm milk with both hands. He was small for his age, with faint bruises on his arms that he tried to cover with his sleeves. She recognized everything about him. Emma knelt down to meet his gaze. Lucas. He looked up at her. His eyes were old, far too old. They were the eyes of a child who had seen things that no child should ever see, just as hers had once been. Are you really going to help me? Emma took his small hand in hers. Listen to me very carefully. What you did tonight, calling for help, asking someone to save you, that was the bravest thing anyone can do. I know this because I did the same thing once, a long time ago. And someone came for me. Someone saved me. Now, I am here to save you. Lucas's face crumpled. He threw his arms around her and began to cry. Emma held him tight. She felt his small body shake with sobs. She felt 18 years of her own journey come together in this one single moment. She looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Dominic was sleeping soundly. He was 56 years old now, fully retired, and living a quiet life with Elena, who, at 76, was still running the shelter, still saving children, still not slowing down. Emma thought of Isabella, the young woman in the picture Dominic always carried in his wallet, the sister whose death transformed a shattered man into a guardian for others, the name that had become a beacon of hope for hundreds of children who had lost their way. She thought of her younger self, 7 years old, with bare feet and bleeding, who had knocked on the devil's door searching for a savior. And in that moment, she knew the journey had come full circle. 18 years ago, she was the little girl who desperately needed to be saved. Tonight, she was the person who came when another child cried out for help. That was the nature of love. It was how healing worked its way through the world. One person saves you, and in turn, you save someone else. It was a chain that could never be broken, a circle without an end. Lucas pulled away from the hug and dried his tears. "What are we going to do now?" Emma offered him a gentle smile. "Now we are going to give you things you have never had. A safe home, a real family, and the opportunity to just be a kid. Is that even possible? I am the living proof." She stood up and took his hand. Side by side, they started walking into the light. 18 years ago, I was a forgotten child, running in the dark, desperate for a champion. Today, I am the champion for others, because that is how love truly works. Someone saves you, and then one day, you save someone else. It is a circle that must never be broken. This story teaches a profound lesson about the strength of the human spirit. No matter how grim your situation may seem, hope can always appear in the most unlikely of places. And when someone helps us, we gain the power to become a helper for others. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss out on our daily inspiring stories. Please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. We would love to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever had a moment where the kindness of a stranger changed your life? Please share your experiences with us in the comments section below. We read every single comment, and your stories give us the inspiration to keep creating content that truly matters. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a valued member of our community. We wish you good health, genuine happiness, and a sense of peace in your everyday life. May you always be able to find a light in the darkness and the courage to help others in their time of need. Goodbye for now, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. Please take care of yourselves and each. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.